The morning after their initial fiery launch was a study in profound stillness. The blizzard had exhausted its fury, leaving the world outside vacuum-sealed in a blanket of pristine white under a sky the color of washed-out steel. Inside the cabin, the only sounds were the soft hiss and pop of embers dying in the hearth and the synchronized rhythm of their breathing. He lay awake, watching her sleep, her body curled into his, a map of contentment he could spend a lifetime exploring. The crimson dress lay in a defeated pool on the floor, a relic of a battle gloriously won. But this was a war of pleasure, and they were both victors. The rage to please from the night before had not vanished, it had transformed. The explosive energy had cooled into a dense, gravitational pull, a certainty that held them in a shared orbit. This was no longer about a rocket launch. It was about the silent, weightless drift through the cosmos that follows. The part of the journey where you simply float, mesmerized by the vast, beautiful emptiness and the singular, brilliant star that is your companion. He shifted slightly, and her eyes fluttered open, dark and deep, holding none of the sleep fog of a normal morning. They were clear, lucid, as if she had been awake with him all along, navigating the same celestial currents in her dreams. A slow smile graced her lips, a silent acknowledgement of the new territory they had charted together. No words were needed. The language of last night, of touch, of breath, of shared climax, had rewritten their code. They spent the day in a state of luxurious isolation, their own private snow globe. They made coffee, their movements languid and easy, their bodies brushing past each other in the small kitchen with an unhurried intimacy. They sat by the window, wrapped in a thick wool blanket, watching the pale sun cast long blue shadows across the snowdrifts. He read to her from an old book of poetry he'd found on the shelf, his voice a low counterpoint to the silence. The words were about love and stars and eternity, and they felt less like fiction and more like a documentary of their own burgeoning reality. As dusk began to reclaim the sky, painting it in hues of violet and rose, a different kind of energy began to build. It wasn't the frenetic, crackling electricity of the previous night. This was slower, deeper, like the turning of a galaxy. He rebuilt the fire, the logs catching with a satisfying whoosh, and she disappeared into the bedroom. He waited, his heart a steady, powerful drum. This time there was no pretense, no siren's call of a scarlet dress. When she emerged, she was gloriously, unashamedly bare. Her skin, warmed by the firelight, seemed to absorb the glow, radiating a soft luminescence. She was not a siren tonight. She was a celestial body, a planet in her own right, with tides and seasons and a core of molten heat he was privileged to explore. Her stilettos were gone, her feet bare against the wood floor, grounding her, making her approach more deliberate, more vulnerable. He rose to meet her, his own shirt already discarded. He didn't pull her to him in a rush. Instead, he stopped a foot away, drinking her in, honoring the space between them before closing it. He raised his hands, not to touch her skin, but to hover them an inch away, from her shoulders down to her hips. He could feel the heat radiating from her, a tangible force, an aura of pure want. She shivered, not from cold, but from the exquisite torture of that near contact. Her eyes closed, her head tilting back in surrender. "Last night," he whispered, his voice thick with the day's unspoken emotions, "was the launch. Tonight, we float." He finally let his palms make contact, smoothing over the planes of her back, the curve of her waist, the swell of her hips. It was not a grasp of possession, but a touch of reverence. He led her, not to the rug, but to the large, fur-lined chair facing the fire. He sat, pulling her down onto his lap, her back against his chest so they could both watch the flames. He wrapped his arms around her, one hand splayed across her stomach, the other tracing lazy, hypnotic circles over her thigh. This was a different kind of passion. It was the slow burn of absolute trust. He kissed her shoulder, her neck, the delicate shell of her ear, whispering to her about the beauty he saw, not just in her body, but in the fierce, brilliant light of her soul. Her breath hitched, her body melting against his, her head resting back against his shoulder. His hands began a slow, meticulous exploration, learning the textures of her skin, the response of her muscles, the secrets her body told without words. He was not stoking a fire, he was mapping a constellation. The rage to please was now a quiet, unwavering focus. His pleasure was secondary, a byproduct derived entirely from hers. He brought her to the edge time and again, a gentle, rhythmic push and pull, like the tide drawn by an unseen moon. Her quiet gasps were the only sounds that punctuated the crackling of the fire. She was adrift, lost in a sea of sensation he had created just for her.